I'm Jeanne and I'm the coordinator of Stafford Street Pastors.
And I'm Trevor Partington. I'm a retired church minister, and since my retirement I've got involved with street pastoring.
Well, it was really interesting because my husband has become a street pastor, and the then treasurer of the management committee asked me, I wasn't a street pastor, and he asked me if I would apply for the job of coordinator, because the coordinator had been voluntary and it was going to become a paid position. And so they were interviewing, and I got the job, but I said I could never be a street pastor because my children always said that if I see things that shock me, it shows on my face, and the whole point of street pastoring is that we're non-judgmental. But I said I would do the roles and responsibility training so that I knew what I was asking the street pastors to do. So I went to the training, which was a whole day training, and I was in the training for 15 minutes when I realised, oh yes, I could be a street pastor, because it was so obvious that we don't know the people before we meet them, and we don't know them after them, but we just offer God's love in that moment. So we don't have to worry about anything. We don't have to worry about how they got in that situation or anything, just love them in the moment. And I found that so liberating, and that was in 2011, so I've done it a long time now.
Yeah, a long time. Trevor, how long have you been involved with Stafford Street Pastors yourself?
I have been involved with street pastors for 13 years, and notwithstanding the fact that when I was a church minister, I never wanted the church to be insular. I wanted it to have an involvement with people who were not connected with church. Nonetheless, I realised when I became a street pastor that there was a whole group of people that the church never reached. People who, not for their fault, had no understanding at all of anything to do with Christianity, had misconceptions. So while the opportunity to share our faith only comes up from time to time, it opened my eyes to the fact that we needed to reach out to these people, and they needed to see us as being normal people.
I was talking this morning, as we were saying before, to a pair from Peterborough, street evangelists, and a girl, she was talking to me, her name was Kelly. She said to me that one thing she's noticed when she's out on the streets is that a lot of the time when she's talking to people who don't, it's almost like when you go to a doctor who doesn't, but the patient doesn't realise they're sick, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Does that, do you understand that sentiment? Have you found that as well whilst
I do understand that. The way street pastors operate is slightly different, because if somebody's doing absolute street evangelism, they are going out with the sole purpose to speak to people about God and about their faith, and encouraging people to find out about faith for themselves. What street pastors do is we go out to first and foremost demonstrate God's love. So what we're doing is we're not telling people what they need to do. We are doing what Jesus asked us to do, and that is being his hands and feet and helping them. Through that, it's like we earn a position to then speak about our faith, because we don't really speak about God and Jesus and our faith without being asked about it. And that changes the dynamic so amazingly. I mean, I think people who go out and do street evangelism just like that are amazing, because that isn't what we do, and I don't know what that would feel like. But the way we do it, we are answering questions. So what you're saying is, don't people, they don't know that they need God. Actually, the majority of people who speak to us, that's what they're saying. They're saying, oh, I think there's something missing. I've got to find out what it is. And interestingly, in the training that we do for street pastors, we have training about drugs and alcohol abuse. And one of the things that has stuck with me since I first heard it was that alcohol doesn't change people. It takes away their inhibitions, so they become more who they are. And what fascinates me is how ready people are to ask us about God when they've had a drink. So it's like all the normal things, the normal barriers are taken away, and they're free to say what's on their mind. And I find that very, very touching and quite illuminating, and it just shows what a responsibility Christians have, that people are walking around with this need in them, and we do need to respond to that.
So it's a case of looking after the physical needs first, it's looking after their well-being first, and
Yes.
then if they want to, if they ask questions, presenting the gospel to them and,
Yes.
and going. That's really wonderful, because I mean I personally think that's not in conflict with what the street evangelists do. It complements it really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It complements
yes.
it really well. It's like two sides of the same
Yes.
coin, if you like.
Yeah.
So what does a typical night for Stafford Street Pastors look like?
We have a vehicle which is marked safety place, which we park right in the centre of the town where many of the clubs are, and we park it there. We go to our base at a Baptist church and pick up our supplies, which I'll talk about later, and then we normally do a round. We go round all the clubs, see how busy it is or how quiet it is. Then we go back to the vehicle. Increasingly, people are coming to the vehicle because they know we're there and asking for help. They may need flip-flops, they may need water, they may be very drunk. If it's winter, they may be very cold and they can get on a warm vehicle. And they know that we're there to help them. So we all work together to keep the nighttime economy safe.
Have you had any particular memorable encounters where in the course of your duty you saw a real impact? Or I should say, which is the most memorable? Because I'm sure you've got many which have impacted
Yes,
you.
there are, and all the street pastors. There's over the years since 2009 when we started. There's been over 70 different people from sort of about 15 different churches in Stafford, and they've all got amazing stories about people that we've met and things that have happened. There is definitely one lady who we met who doesn't live in Stafford anymore, but she had come to Stafford. She did have faith, and she'd kind of got a bit lost, and she came to Stafford and she was wondering about finding a church, and she was out on a Saturday evening and she met the street pastors, and she actually ended up coming to Church Lane with us and got baptised and then got married. So that was an amazing story. And there are all kinds of stories of people who we've met who, and there's another young lady actually who a while ago, it was this young lady, sort of in her 40s she is, who was talking to Trevor, who Trevor mentioned, how she didn't believe in God, and the reason was that her sister had died in her 40s and she thought God was very cruel because he'd taken her. Anyway, Trevor and the other street pastors on the team that night spent a long time talking to this lady, and as he said, her attitude softened. Then during the week she rang me, because anyone can ring street pastors at any time, and she rang me and we had a very similar conversation again, and she was very grateful. And then a couple of weeks later my phone rang on a Saturday night and I wasn't on duty, but she said to me, "It's me again." She said, "Where are the street pastors?" And I said, "Oh, they're just getting ready, they'll be at the van in a moment." And she said, "Oh, because I've got some biscuits and sweets for them." And she said, "I'm going to church, I've found a church and I'm going to church." So, and these are the people we know. And I've just been in contact with another young lady who we helped years ago, back in 2014, and she had quite a remarkable story, and she dropped out of uni and she'd really given up on everything. the street pastors met her, and if someone is very vulnerable, we take them home in a taxi, and we'd done that for her on this particular night. Anyway, a couple of years later, I happened to meet her again on a duty, 3 o'clock in the morning. She wasn't drunk, she was completely sober, she'd had a lovely night out, and she said, street pastors completely changed my life. And after that night, when we'd taken her home, she'd woken up the next morning and she said it was like a light had come on in her head, that people cared. And because of our celebration next week of our presentation of the King's Award, I emailed her, because I still had her email address, and I said, I don't know if you would like to say something at the presentation. And she's got a little girl now, and she said, I can't come out, but I'll write you a letter to read. And she's written the most beautiful letter. So she had gone back to uni, she's got a really good job, she's a speech and language therapist, and it's just amazing. And that was from that kindness. So we didn't even, that's what we talk about, that was a demonstration of God's love. She wasn't in any position for us to witness to her verbally, but it was God's love that brought her round, because she said it was like her grandparents, she lived with her grandparents, and they had to tell her in the morning how she got home. She had no memory of anything. And she wrote to us at the time, and then the next time when I met her, she told us the story of going back to uni and getting her degree.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful.
Yeah. In Britain, we have this culture where, like you say, something goes wrong, your nan dies, you're going through a problem in the family, things aren't working out well for you. A lot of the time, and you see this especially with students, when things are a bit difficult at uni and things aren't going quite well, they go out, get drunk and use that as a way of self-medication. Now, obviously, there's healthy and safe ways to go out and enjoy yourself on a weekend evening. Do you find that people will go out to do what I just said, to self-medicate? Because obviously, as Christians, for example, we will talk to God, we will talk to each other, we'll pray about our problems. People who don't have God in their lives, do you find that that's when drugs and alcohol and excessive, really like dangerous behaviours come out, because they don't have anywhere else to turn to?
Yes, in fact, we had a case this past Friday when a lady said to me, you helped my friend on New Year's Eve and I want to thank you. You retrieved her handbag from the Lamb Inn, and she was so drunk she couldn't remember where she lived, but she knew she had the keys in the handbag. And I said, well, we couldn't go into her handbag, but 2 police ladies were able to retrieve the keys. And we couldn't take her home in a taxi because she was too drunk, so they took her home in the squad car. And she said to me, she got drunk because she'd all these issues in her life. So as you have rightly said, it was self-medicating, it was trying to blot out the problems that she'd gone through. And part of me understands that. You know, if people don't have the faith that we have to pray about our situation, it's very easy to go blotto, drink too much. So one can understand that.
And we are, in our training, the roles and responsibility training that street pastors do is done by Ascension Trust, which is the umbrella organisation. And every street pastor has the same training. So the idea is that wherever you meet a street pastor, obviously we're all different characters and personalities, but the same non-judgmental care and love. Just actually, it should be, if you meet a Christian, that is basically what it is.
Where do you find, that, as I said, the confidence and the outgoingness and the bravery to go out to you don't know what you're going to encounter? So, and ask the people at street pastors, at street evangelists as well, because I'm genuinely actually really inspired. I found it really inspirational what they were saying. So can I ask you two the same question?
That actually is a very interesting question, James, because people assume that those who go out on the streets as street pastors are of a certain ilk, a certain character. They're very extrovert, they're very verbal. Nothing could be further from the truth. Jeanne, as our coordinator, mixes up the teams so we get to know all of our street pastors, and we're all very, very different in personality. Some of our street pastors are very good at helping people when they've vomited after drinking too much, caring for them. We have a retired paramedic who knows instantly whether a person needs medical help or not. We have nurses who know how to deal with minor injuries. And then, because of my being a church minister, not surprisingly, if the faith conversations do come up, I'm able to address that more easily. But we have one young man who is very, very quiet on team, but he's marvellous at spotting situations. About a year ago, I missed it completely. He spotted a young man who was about to commit suicide and jump into the river. And he instantly spotted it. So it's working together with our weaknesses and strengths that enables our team to work effectively.
And I think, James, what you said is we have all those different characters and personalities, and what gives us the courage to do it. As the coordinator, I have a lot to do with all the different street pastors, and I know them all really well. And there's just one characteristic that each of them has that is the same, and that is love, God's love.
Coming to the end now, how has being a street pastor grown and impacted your faith personally?
Thank you. That's a lovely question, because, as I said at the beginning, when I went for the training and realised that you meet people in a moment, and this is what the training says, you know, that everything in that person's life, like you were saying about drinking to self-medicate, everything in that person's life has brought them to that moment. They were always going to be there at that moment. And so that's the moment we meet them. And that's the moment where we give God's love. It doesn't matter what's happened before. We may never see them again. But at that moment, we love them. And this is where it changed me as a Christian completely, because I thought, wow, if I can do that between 10:30 at night and 4 in the morning, I can do that every moment of every day. Everyone I meet, I just love them there. I don't have to worry what their lifestyle is, whether they're doing this right, that wrong, whatever. I just love them. And it was so liberating, and it really did change me as a Christian.
I have appreciated so much mixing with people from different denominations and realising that we all have a oneness. We may worship slightly differently, some more formal than others, but nonetheless our faith unites us. And it's also surprisingly sharpened, if I may put it this way, my evangelistic tool. Because if I am not aware of need, not aware of the spiritual need and the lostness of many people, I can become very lackadaisical in my approach to things. And I have no desire to share what I believe is good news with people. But when I see it eyeball to eyeball and see how lost and how confused some people are, it really gives me a greater desire to share my faith with a lost world.
In the story of Jonah, just at the end, God talks about the Ninevites, and he says they didn't know their left hand from their right hand.
Yes, indeed.
And it just reminded me of what you're saying. sometimes literally when people get so drunk they don't know their left hand from the right hand. And spiritually, even when people are sober, sometimes they don't know their left hand from the right hand.
Indeed.
Yeah. So that's honestly, it's been a pleasure to speak to you both. But before we finish, I want to ask Jeanne, how can people get involved? How can people learn more about the Stafford Street Pastors? And how can, if someone's had an encounter with Stafford Street Pastors who may be listening, how can they follow up, and maybe if they want to learn more about God, maybe they want to get involved in the Christian community here in Stafford, how can they get involved and contact you?
Thank you, James. The best way to contact us is through the email, which comes direct to me, which is staffordstreetpastors@gmail.com. And that's a really good way, and I'm on that all the time, so that's a very immediate way to contact us. Our phone number is 075 07567 072,